right. I believe we're live.
All right.
So, wonderful news in Canada. We have a budget. And the long national nightmare of the Jian Ghomeshi Trial is about to be over. What does it all mean?
I guess once again I'm going to explain it and you're going to add your commentary.
That is the format, at least so far.
All right. Well, with the budget, it's good news, bad news, and terrible news.
Really? I mean, just the fact that they have actually completed a budget. It is an actual budget, right? I mean,
Yes, it is, as of this morning now, an actual budget.
well, that means the provinces finally get to do their budgets, which means the cities finally get to do their budgets,
Yeah.
which means everybody who's been waiting to see if they still have a job or possibly will have a job in the future or what their services will be will finally get an answer.
Yes, this is part of the good news. Now, in the land of good news, yes, the budget is finally out. They're going to be able to make decisions, and the provinces and the cities will be able to do their planning and start approving certain projects and not approving others.
Yay! Edmonton may still have a downtown library. Possibly, maybe.
Well, let's finish the good news. In the good news is the government did one of the things I think they did that is rather wise is a good portion of the infrastructure money they're putting in, billions of dollars, into affordable housing and renovating homeless shelters. This was a criticism of the government during when they were bringing in Syrian refugees, and this will create construction jobs. It's something a lot of the cities have been refusing to do for a while. And it's going to help lessen the economic impact on families and people that have been basically screwed.
All right.
Now, I think that is a really good thing that he made the right decision on that.
Yeah, well, we'll get some more low cost housing, I guess.
Is there anything else I wanted to list in the good news category? He didn't bail out Bombardier. There's nothing for Bombardier in the budget, it turns out. Bombardier actually has released, or at least executives in Bombardier have given statements that Bombardier is going to have to find another plan.
So he didn't provide them with the giant bailout they were looking for.
No, he didn't. And I think that is overall a good thing.
Yeah, probably.
Where else am I going to find some good news here?
Well, isn't he providing money to the various provinces and for various infrastructure projects and other things?
Let me see if I can find more good news, because I have to then explain a large amount of bullshit.
Well, let's move on.
Hold on, wait. There was one other bit of good news. Oh yes, we're actually putting some money into the veterans budget. We're also retroactively giving some money to the veterans budget. Like, it's not probably as far as a lot of people would like to go for the veterans, but as a point in favor to Justin Trudeau, he actually has done more for the veterans in this budget than the last few administrations.
All right.
That is the end of the good news. Now time for the bad news.
Okay.
Perhaps the worst thing is this budget, the tune of it, in my opinion, is fuck the poor.
That would be odd given the campaign the Liberals ran in their election.
Well, the promised small business tax reduction that was promised, right, is not there. They
Yeah,
have,
but that's evil lower middle class capitalists there, not actual desperate poor people.
yeah, they also, those are the companies that are most also likely to hire the poor. Like, say, the little shop is going to hire people usually with is a little to no skills in entry level work for around minimum wage or a little bit above. That's entry level work for poor people or people that have just been kicked out of their industry from economic hardship.
Yeah, especially people who are transitioning and don't have the right certificates or degrees. I
Yeah.
recently heard about somebody who, when they applied for a secretarial position, effectively were asked if they had a master's in office administration.
Yeah. Yeah. No, small businesses provide the transitional jobs and a bunch of the jobs to the poor, and usually are the ones that are investing in the poor. Now, in a little bit of fairness, they are offering a tax credit to small businesses, but it's not nearly the same thing as a tax rate lowering. And in my opinion, the tax credit isn't going to really do anything.
Well, what is the tax credit for?
That's the thing. I can't find out exactly what it's for other than it exists.
Oh, so it's that unfortunate tendency the Canadian governments have to put in tax breaks, which only people who have access to tax lawyers can find.
Well, the thing is, they have made a point of saying that it exists, but it's somewhere buried in the budget that isn't reported by the news, and I haven't been able to find out exactly what it is.
It'd be nice to know. I mean, if it's for employing people, that might not be a bad thing, or possibly
Like,
tax break for I don't know, business infrastructure improvements.
uh, I don't know. Like, I
But
found like a section under small business income tax rate in the budget. Um, set talks that they are eventually going to reduce the income tax rate of the small business down at some point, but it doesn't really talk about a tax credit aside from capital property up to $3,000.
well, maybe that's it. Effectively, the capital property you
Yeah, but
own.
that's the thing. Capital property
So
doesn't matter too much to small businesses because they usually don't own capital property.
no, they don't. They lease.
Yeah.
Very few
Yeah.
small businesses actually own their site of business. I mean,
Yeah.
for some small rural family owned businesses, that's probably advantageous.
And aside from that, there is a tax credit listed under the small businesses for venture capital corporation tax credit, where venture capital corporations will get a tax credit.
How small a business are they talking about? Venture capital businesses deal in millions and millions of dollars.
That's the thing. The limit is $500,000 in revenue for a year.
Holy
So
crap, unless you're some sort of charitable, we're assisting people and then you to start tiny little business loans and you then call yourself a venture capitalist, you're not a venture capitalist.
yeah, like I'm wondering if this is a typo or I'm misreading it, but it's listed or it's just in the wrong section. But so far as the only things I could find are the tax credits they've mentioned for small businesses.
Well, I wonder if I could get myself licensed as a venture capitalist with a few $1,000s. Although I'm not sure exactly what I would be able to do with that other than kickstart my local drug dealer.
Yeah. like, like, I don't really know. Like, there's nothing really here that is going to help small businesses at all. And without the tax lowering, small businesses are fucked.
Well, to a certain extent, small businesses have always had it a little rough in Canada.
Yes, but this was something promised by the liberals, and was something really championed by a lot of economists, and it's not there. It's not there. They've basically put in some. It's no, maybe somewhere it's some listed somewhere, but so far it just looks like a small frivolous things that mean nothing, just to say they did something.
All right. Well,
Uh, then going on into bad news, there's national defense.
what? Canada doesn't need national defense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it really does.
Well,
Look,
if Donald Trump is president, it might need national defense, and not for the reason people might be thinking.
yeah, well, there's Donald Trump, there's Vladimir Putin, and there's just maintaining uh just the safety of things like the shipping lanes that are going to be opening around Canada. Like, the things that are being cut from the defense isn't just like the jets. Like, I was in favor actually of not going with their new super jet flying coffins. That giant boondoggle of the Joint Strike Fighter, like that I would have been okay with. But this is putting off till then after the next election the purchases and constructions of our military ships.
Okay, but we're maintaining our existing navy,
Yeah,
right?
we're maintaining the existing navy, except that our ships are getting old, and as far as I can see, there's no money to renovate them, or what would you call it? Upgrade them, or well, keep them floating. So
Well, I guess we'll just have to give all our fish to the Spanish when they next come by into the Grand Banks.
yeah, we might have to do that. And as the Northern Territory goes, like a lot of those ships that were supposed to be built with that in mind. Just not even for like defending us against, say, a Russian incursion, but just keeping that passage safe and just being able to patrol it.
Yeah, control of your waters means it's people and nations and non-state actors can't just use parts of your distant territories to do whatever they feel like. But
Yeah,
I guess we can rely on the Americans to get worried enough that they'll patrol it for us.
unless Donald Trump is president.
Yes, unless Donald Trump is president and withdraws from NATO and tells everybody you're on your own as far as defense is concerned.
Yeah, yeah. Then going in the tax section, and this is also pretty bad news. Uh, they're effectively raising taxes on families in the middle class. They are getting rid of a bunch of tax breaks and tax credits for things like tuition and textbooks, as well as the children's fitness tax credit the conservatives put in is gone. um Tax credits for certain arts is gone, and they've gotten rid of income splitting for families with children.
Really?
Yep.
No income splitting?
None.
Is there income splitting for families without children?
I don't believe so.
So they were allowing income splitting if you had children.
Yeah.
So effectively, right now, it's best, quite possibly, to not get married.
And have children, yeah. No, this is effectively a tax rise on families, and generally, it's going to hit the middle class and the poor. Like a lot of families were depending on this and are the ones that have been hit hardest and are the most financially vulnerable because their expenses are much higher than single people. And now in this time of economic problems, they're getting screwed.
Yeah, that doesn't sound good. I mean, there were definitely some loopholes in that, in some of those tax breaks, which could be exploited, but you don't want to discourage people who actually want to get married when they have children from getting married when they have children.
Not to mention that part of the reason we have our problem with Canadian pension has been people have not been having enough children.
No, that's okay. We can fill it up with Syrian refugees.
No, we can't
Highly
actually.
skilled Syrian refugees.
No, we actually
With
cannot.
university educations.
Yeah, no, we can't. And also, this is going to just. There's also the point of that in this budget, they have returned the retirement age, or the reform Harper did, back to 65 years of age.
Oh dear. That's going to be a huge problem, mostly for future governments, but
Yes,
people are
yes, it is.
living longer, and actually, it's a good thing, at least in the non physical occupations, that they're able to work longer if they don't develop an Alzheimer's or something unfortunate.
Mhm.
And the reason they did that was as people live longer and longer, their health care costs get higher and higher, and their retirement costs get higher and higher. It becomes a real problem to sustain the entire retirement system altogether.
Mhm. And yeah, and then there's just even things like, well, I guess that's the bad news. Then I'm just going to get into just the terrible news. Uh, oh no, this is actually in the bad news. Now, while they're doing the low income housing infrastructure, they're doing that.
All right.
If cities put in half the money, they're going to get their very restricted green projects that will amount to their metro lines in the cities. So I guess some cities are going to be happy about that.
Well, that's
But
actually what most of the mayors asked for was metro line projects.
yeah, but a lot of the core infrastructure projects that the country really needed, like refurbishing a lot of our roads or building new roads, rail, upgrading our border stations, upgrading our ports, renovating some of our hydroelectric dams.
Yeah, that really needs to be done and is really expensive.
None of that is there. It's talked about, but a lot of it has been postponed to the future.
Ooh, how far into the future?
To be considered in the next budget or the budget after that, or sometime maybe possibly.
Oh dear.
So a lot of these critical infrastructure projects that economists were saying we absolutely need, which amounts to the infrastructure deficit we have in the country.
Yes, the things that right now, while the dollar is crappy and interest rates are at rock bottom, we should get done as quickly as possible before there's any actual interest rates potential increases.
Yes, because we need those hydroelectric dams renovated. Hell, well, people don't like nuclear power. We need some of our nuclear power plants renovated because if we don't, we're going to have some serious problems with them. We
Oh, you
need
mean like the Japanese who tried to run their nuclear reactors from the 1950s that were supposed to shut down into the 1970s into the 21st century?
like those. Or like our dams that at the rate things are going, some of them might just break apart and start flooding areas. I mean,
Actually, that would be a really big problem.
yes, it would be. Like, granted, a lot of these problems aren't happening next year, but continuing to put them off as we've been doing, and this is the time when he was elected for infrastructure, this is the time to do it. I would be fully in favor of massive deficits for upgrading all of these things because it's just going to get more expensive, and there's going to be a government that maybe not the next election, but in about a decade from now, that is going to be totally fucked.
Well, also, I mean, the fact is that it's very unlikely that one of these dams will actually burst and flood the surrounding area. But it might become so dangerous that they effectively have to open the sluice gates and release a good portion of the reservoir and shut down the electrical production of the dam. And that's going to screw over Eastern Canada.
Yes, it will. And a lot of these problems are coming in the future from our border stations that we should upgrade.
Yeah, that'd be really nice, especially since the U.S. is currently the only first world economy which is actually growing at a rapid rate. We really need to make sure we're able to sell our products to the Americans with
And
our cheap dollar.
and also to keep things in a way safe, because if the Americans keep going down this path, now it's unlikely in my opinion, but there is the possibility of continued political instability in the United States, and we don't want that shit coming up here.
Yes, I mean, there's definitely some theories going around here that the United States is inevitably doomed to a cultural breakup. But I think it's probably overblown.
I think it's overblown too, but there's every reason just to upgrade the border stations. I mean, it's not that expensive. It would have cost us about $300 million to $500 million.
Well, anyway, if none of this is being done, then where are the billions and billions of deficit spending are going, or have they canceled the 30 billion?
Oh no, we're still running a $30 billion deficit. Now, just to say, well, I'll go then into the terrible news.
Well, there has to be if we're still spending $30 billion and it's not on infrastructure projects.
Oh, well, now the terrible news is a lot of the money, that's a good portion of the money for infrastructure, is going to certain green projects. The one that I think ticks me off the most is what's that itemized list for the wonderful, it's about $1 billion. We are building charge stations throughout all of Canada for electrical, hydrogen, and natural gas run cars.
Okay, that could be a payoff in the somewhat distant future and would set up the infrastructure for those vehicles, but likely only one of those technologies is going to survive into the future.
Only one of those technologies was going to survive in the future. This is not something that is going to really stimulate the economy. Furthermore, these charge stations, this is a business that was going to be taken up by the same people that run gas stations.
Well, actually, in at least this city, there are several gas stations who do provide basically compressed and liquefied natural gas for those vehicles who've been converted to use it.
Yes.
I mean, it's only like one station out of every 10 or 15 stations, but they are actually out there, and most of them are the independent stations.
Yeah.
So that, along with diesel, is definitely out here. Electrical charging stations, that have seen far less of, mostly because the ones you see down in the States are basically solar powered, and this is Canada, and we have a long period of time in which solar power doesn't work very well.
Yeah, but the natural thing was that as electrical cars become more popular, like either the gas stations would take that over, or what Tesla would be doing is either petitioning the cities to put them up or actually putting them up themselves. There was no need or impetus by the government to do such a massive project or put that kind of funding into charging stations. It's not going to employ that many people to build the charging stations, and there's no economic need. And even in terms of the environment, I'm sorry, but gas run cars do not cause that much pollution.
No, they cause a fair amount of pollution. If you could efficiently change off them, it would be worthwhile. I mean, the current problems are the cost of the electrical vehicle, the battery, and the efficiency of the use of electricity means that the actual pollution produced at the power plant, which provides electricity to run the electric car, is not that substantially lower at this point.
Not only that, but this will just increase demands on our electrical grid. So we'll be burning more coal, because coal is still one of the main sources of power in Canada, and might continue to be so, since it looks like we're not going to be renovating our nuclear and hydroelectric dams anytime soon.
But yeah, I mean, the other thing I haven't been aware of, have they settled on a standardized plug-in and voltage amperage of the charge that all electrical cars will use?
I honestly don't know.
Because
Like,
they haven't.
I believe it's more or less been settled on what Tesla's doing, because Tesla is the main electrical car manufacturer, but I don't believe there's any agreement between electric car producers that, yeah, we're only going to use this voltage and car plug.
Yeah, that's sort of a problem for any competitors with Tesla, especially if Tesla has done the usual thing and patented its particular plugin, and I can really hear you clinking away there.
Sorry. Anyways, but yeah.
Because unless Tesla has made that an open standard, which they're happy to let any other manufacturer use, then each manufacturer's electric cars will need to go on something else, or effectively you'll give Tesla a permanent, well, at least a semi-permanent monopoly on the electrical car market, which will mean no competition means very little impetus to progress.
Yeah.
So that's also a definite concern that I'm not sure what plug-in they're going to do. Also, hydrogen fuel-powered cars have so far been, I hate to say this, a horrendous failure.
Yes, they have. I mean,
and right now the technology is not looking good. There are a few enthusiasts who are really still pushing it, mostly on Iceland. But overall, hydrogen fuel cells have sort of hit a giant limit, and unless there's a technological breakthrough, they're being overtaken by just plain old batteries.
yeah, I mean, like, I think I would speculate that part is more just to keep the hydrogen buses of Toronto alive. But yeah, no, it's turned out to be a complete boondoggle, and yeah, I mean, we are really only considering electrical cars at this point.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, even the hydrogen fuel cell stations to be used out in areas where you can't run electrical lines never really went anywhere. It's just cracking hydrogen is just electrically really, really, really energy intensive and inefficient.
Yeah. With the charge stations being built, like, the only people that were able to afford a Tesla car were the high middle class and the wealthy. Like, just looking up how much a Tesla cost.
Oh, I believe the cost has come down. I mean, it's still not gasoline car cost.
I'm going to go with the popular Model S. That is the popular model. We'll use that as the benchmark here. A Model S goes a long time. Okay, order yours. How much money is it going to cost in American dollars? It is going to cost. I can lease it out in the lowest possible version for $1,203 American a month with a $5,000 American down payment. And that is a car with only the 70 kilowatt battery, so it only has a 385 kilometer range.
Mm-hmm.
So if I want the one that doesn't completely suck, that is going to be a lease payment of $1,625 a month.
Yes, definitely not a toy for the working class.
No, it is not. No, that is a car for the higher middle class and the wealthy. And I guess people that want to show off their environmental cred, and this program is for those people who have been sort of annoyed that they can't travel across the country or have trouble doing it because most small towns don't have electrical charge stations.
Mm-hmm.
So that happened. And now
well, that's $1 billion.
Well, now into the really bad news. As far as I can see, a lot of the Liberals' projected deficit for $30 billion, and this is what I've been able to gauge from the budget, is actually overinflated. That act is, a lot of people, I think, a lot of people aren't going to be able to benefit from these programs. Like the small business capital thing, they're estimating I'd have to look again, but they're estimating a lot of businesses would use this, when in reality, I don't think barely anyone is going to use it.
Well, now, if it's generous enough in its usefulness, large businesses will spin off small associated businesses, possibly many of them, to utilize this and to manage their capital property.
Yeah.
So it could be a boon, but it won't be a boon to actual small businesses.
Yeah, and it's going to come down lower, in my personal opinion, than they're estimating. And I think a lot of their programs are designed this way. Like with the they did give a benefit for like student loans, right? Where to low incomes, and they're also putting in a rule that you're only going to have to pay your student loan off when you're earning about $20,000 a year. And then you think this is a great idea, but the student loan fund didn't need exactly that much money. And also, if you think about it, what job can you possibly have that isn't going to pay you $20,000 a year?
Well, it just means that effectively, if you've gotten a education and you're unemployed or you're self-employed and not doing particularly well, that you won't have to pay off your student loans yet.
Yeah, which isn't going to affect a lot of people.
I know,
Like,
it's still, I think, a good change.
it's going to change in the right direction, right? But my point is that it's not going to affect that many people, and it's not going to see the kind of spending right in those areas that would justify the $30 billion deficit. Realistically, I would say that what's going to end up happening is this budget has a lot of padding in it, and they're doing this to be able to announce next year that either the deficit came down a lot lower, or if the economy gets a lot worse, they're going to still be able to come under a $30 billion deficit. And that's kind of the problem with this budget. This budget isn't really designed to help the economy much. It is basically designed for propaganda to make the Liberal Party look good. A lot of these projects are just show projects. They're not, few economists would think this is going to have a real impact. And meanwhile, in order to also prop the budget up, they're basically taking a lot of money out of the unemployment insurance fund and putting it straight into the budget. So that's being looted. And
why would they need to loot that if they're going to run a deficit?
Well, that's a good question, especially since...
And also, there's lots of unemployed people right now.
Yeah, there's lots of unemployed people, but there's the other things in the budget and things that have been released, right? Like, they have increased the amount of time you can be on EI by 5 whole weeks. But still, you'd expect people to be able to use that, right? Until you look more into the details, right? And it's only extended in certain areas. And believe it or not, Edmonton isn't one of them.
Oh, certain geographical areas?
Yeah.
How the hell does that make sense?
Either
you're unemployed for an extra 5 weeks because you can't find a job, or you're not.
Yeah. No, the thing is, we had enough money in the unemployment insurance fund that you could increase EI by a lot more, and you could even justify to increase the EI payments. Or at least take some of that money from the EI fund and put it into programs to get people that are on EI the retraining they need.
Yes, that would be nice.
Instead, they have looted the fund, only put increased it in certain geographical areas where Edmonton is a place that is experiencing a lot of unemployed refugees from Fort McMurray and other areas, is not a part of it.
Well, what areas are getting the extension in EI?
Well, for example, Fort McMurray is, right? And you think this is a good idea, but then you think about it with the way Fort McMurray is, and virtually if you don't have a job at Fort McMurray, you're already moved.
Yeah, no, it's really expensive to eat and live there, and you only do that with the really high-paying jobs which exist there.
Yeah. Like,
so if you remain homeless in Fort McMurray, begging for scraps, you can get additional EI.
Yes. However, if you have tried to move to, say, Edmonton or some of the other communities, you're not going to get your EI extension. Unless I'm misinterpreting things. which is possible, but already the city is complaining about it and the premier and are hoping that this is going to change and are all wondering what the flying fuck. But my interpretation is they wanted to say they're increasing EI by 5 weeks and doing something, but in reality, I think I'd have to look more into it, but they're doing it in such a way that it's not going to actually help anything. Ah. No, and I feel that this is the way for a lot of things. Like they've said they're increasing money for seniors, right? That seniors that are currently in poverty will get a bit more of money, right? But that's still not separate from, say, welfare, and they've only increased it by $80 a month. They're saying they're going to be providing an increase or a new Canada Child Benefit, which will give money to families with children.
Right, yeah. Well, they're already basically not allowing them to split their income if they're married, so.
But this is completely dependent on the family situation, and the rules and regulations for it isn't quite set, and the program isn't starting right away, or we know what it's going to be.
Oh. So effectively, this is the skeleton of a budget with a bunch of the little modules and chunks not fitted in yet.
Yeah. Like, they're going to have to decide exactly what is going to qualify for what. They say it's going to have a net cost over 5 years of $22 billion, but you can't, it's hard to say who's going to be affected by it. And in the meantime, the tax breaks people were expecting are gone.
Well, all right. That's the budget situation.
Oh no, I have one last point to point out. In addition to all of this, the Liberals have done something really weird that I think is, well, it's maybe with the best of intentions, is going to start causing a lot of problems. And that is the $150 tax credit to teachers to provide students with class material.
Why would it be teachers' responsibility to buy their classes' materials?
Well, as far as I can see, some places do have a problem with classrooms that have been underfunded, and our teachers have had to pay out of pocket to supply their students with things, right?
Well, there's been news stories about that, but
Yeah,
that was
there's no problem.
largely scare stories in the newspapers
Yeah.
about how good, well-meaning teachers, if they wanted to get certain things for their classes, paid for it out of their own pocket.
Yeah. But also there has been the idea, which actually I'm sort of in favor of allowing teachers in a classroom to have a small discretionary budget.
Yeah, but this isn't a discretionary budget. This is a tax break for spending your own money on things you determine are going to be for your classroom.
Yeah, that's the problem, right? Like, this is, to approve something like that, that would have to be approved on a school board level, like by the local school board. And they can't do that because the prime minister doesn't have that power. So instead, they've decided to open the floodgates of corruption and having this tax credit where...
Well, if we look at this in the best possible light, as effectively just helping out these teachers fill the gap in the budget, it's still effectively putting onto teachers the responsibility to fill this gap in their budget from their own personal funds, and then reclaim it on their taxes,
Oh
which
yes.
is wrong. You should not be forcing teachers to do this. You
Oh
should
yes.
be increasing their personal budgets for classroom incidentals, which
Yes.
then, and the really bad side, there's going to be a few people who are effectively going to use this as a giant tax break for buying whatever they feel they need and can temporarily use in their classroom.
Oh, and less scrupulous school boards will use this as an excuse to cut classroom budgets by exactly $150.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing. I mean, effectively, teachers are going to be screwed on both sides. The actual good teachers are going to be really screwed by this, and any ones of them who are either corrupt or just plain desperate for money are going to effectively wreck the system for all the good teachers.
And just also to say, it's just generally the budgeting for schools is, with especially this, is becoming an increasing nightmare. Like, schools have a horrific job in budgeting because they have to consider the amount of money that is coming in from the local school board, then the money that is coming in from the province, then the money that's coming in away from the federal government, the money they fundraise, and now this tax credit. This is 5 areas where schools can get completely screwed over, and it makes budgeting from year to year a nightmare. No.
Mind you, it is only $150 per teacher.
Yeah.
Credit,
Well,
right.
classroom, yes.
Per class. Per. Well, how's it divided
actually,
up? It probably.
You know what? I should know. Actually, I'm not entirely sure, but actually, logically, it should be by teacher.
Yeah, because each teacher files their own income taxes and they
Yeah.
have to have a deduction. So logically, unless it's really convolutedly written, it's just $150. I mean, that's not too bad. I mean, you can't sort of, you could pad your DVD collection, but you can't really buy a personal computer off that. So for incidentals, I mean, it's a very bad precedent to set that teachers should be expected to actually pay for classroom materials and then write it off their own taxes.
Mhm.
But still, it's a small amount per teacher. I think the graft and corruption will be minimal. I just don't like the precedent.
Yeah, it's minimal, but at the same time, it's a terrible precedent to set. It adds another layer of complexity. For a classroom, $150 does mean quite a bit, and it's going to put pressure on teachers to spend that money and be judged how they spend that money.
Oh, yes. Now, after this is done, every teacher is going to be expected to pay, you get a personal allotment of stuff that they bring in to liven up their class and then deduct it off their taxes.
Yes. No.
Which is bullshit.
Oh, yes. And no, like, and just in this whole thing of the budget, this budget isn't being done with any thought of really helping the situation with Canadians. Aside from the investment in low-income housing, this isn't going to boost the economy, and this is just seeding in massive problems for the future.
Well, the bigger problem I seem to have here is they don't seem to have fleshed out a bunch of their programs. It all seems to be a lot of it seems to be to be determined. The one big green infrastructure project we know they're doing is of dubious value.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the rest are just nips and tucks around the edges, some of which don't seem to be going in the right direction.
No. And it doesn't seem to be going in the right direction at all, or it doesn't seem to have an actual plan in mind for getting the economy up and running. Like, This is a budget that Paul Krugman, the person that advocates deficit spending at the New York Times a lot and won a Nobel Prize, will say in a few years if this budget doesn't work, is saying, well, you spent the money wrong. And he'd be right.
Or you just, well, in his case, he probably would say that you didn't spend enough money.
Well, he'd probably go actually for both.
Yeah, he usually does.
And you can just also see the potential for graft and corruption, the vast money that the CBC is getting. Like, over 5 years, they're getting $675 million.
Well, they really helped the liberals out.
The CBC, I could see justification for $100 million, but this is freaking ridiculous. Like, what are they going to do? Give Peter Mansbridge a gold statue in front of the CBC? Like,
well, they'll probably fund a whole bunch of Canadian television shows and comedy programs, of which about 1 in every 100 will actually break out and become an actual international success. And the rest won't even be watched by Canadians.
And a lot of the First Nations budget, it's good that they're spending $4 billion over the 5 years on improvements, but it feels kind of like a bribe.
Well, it's what Canada does to the First Nations in Quebec all the time. It bribes them with large amounts of money to stay quiet for a little while longer.
Yeah, it's not going to solve the problems in the reserves. And looting, the changes they've done for pension plans, reverting it back, and a whole EI bullshit, this is just going to fuck people in the future, and mostly the middle class and poor people. No, the Liberal Party slogan really should be "fuck the poor." In many ways, with the effective tax increases they've made, this is basically what they accuse the Conservatives of doing. In fact, I would go as far to say that they are acting like Conservatives, or what people accuse the Conservatives of being, of people that only care about the high middle class and the wealthy, with the exception that they want to improve the environment and they don't like fighting, so they don't care about the defense budget. And the Conservatives are evil because they do care about the defense budget and aren't that concerned with the environment.
No, there's a big difference. The Conservatives want to help the rich people by lowering the rich people's taxes. The Liberals are helping rich people by giving the rich people more services.
Yeah. And also one final point of just on the principle, the Liberals promised in their elections campaign something completely different. They promised, one of the promises I agreed with was a real revitalization of our infrastructure that has been put off for decades by governments. They promised that they were going to lower the small business taxes. They promised a bunch of other tax breaks. They promised, I believe, a lot less CBC funding.
I don't think they promised that.
I think in the election they promised only $150 million for CBC.
All right, they promised less than they eventually gave them.
Yes. And they promised that they were going to keep the defense budget, and they said they were even going to increase it. I mean, they promised the world, and now they're giving reality.
Yeah, but that's normal from a political campaign.
It is, but the thing is, the conservatives promised a realistic budget, and for that matter, the NDP promised a realistic budget. The NDP didn't promise the world, neither did the conservatives. The liberals promised everything under the tree and have basically given a budget of fuck the poor.
Hmm. Well, at least the provinces can start doing their budgets, and we'll just have to see how it all works out.
Yep.
But on to our other issue. Apparently, that horrible pervert Jian Ghomeshi is going to probably go free.
I would put it at 95% chance he's going to be found not guilty, and rightfully so.
Well, look, I mean, I think it was the National Post who wrote an article about how this particular judge is a stickler for the law and for innocence, the reasonable doubt provision.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, although it looks like he's definitely into some kinky stuff and possibly is not the best at getting consent before he attempts to involve you in his kinky stuff,
We don't even know.
he's there effectively reasonable doubt is easily established on any actual assault or rape charges.
We don't even know that because virtually all of the witnesses that have been found to be unreliable, they've all been proven to be lying based on their text message and emails to Jian Ghomeshi.
Well, they've been proven that they didn't care enough about when he slapped them to not try and continue to date him.
More than that, their statements that they said sometimes under oaths were that they, at least a couple of them, that they made no attempt to contact Ghomeshi afterwards, and that has clearly been shown not to be true.
Yeah, as I said, even if he slapped them, they apparently still wanted to date him.
Yeah. No. The trial went, as far as I could see, how it's supposed to.
I know. The fact is, this looks like just a possibly dysfunctional series of relationships which eventually broke up with no permanent harm done to anyone.
Pretty much, yeah. And then they decided to come after him because of the current zeitgeist around over this kind of thing. And even if he's found innocent in this trial, there's already another trial with a bunch of other charges scheduled for, I believe, June.
Yeah, well, presumably they'll be slightly smarter in their testimony in the new trial, although at this point it's doubtful they'll get a conviction there either.
Yeah. No, I would say it's pretty done. The greater problem is I would say, like, Ghomeshi is probably a pervert. His personality is that, at least his radio personality is a bit of an insufferable asshole.
But a lot of people like him, and
oh yeah,
especially our fans of his previous music career.
Yeah, but
the fact is, there's nothing illegal about being a pervert. In fact, there's nothing inherently wrong with being a pervert. The only real question is, were the other parties consenting? And if they weren't consenting, did he actually hurt them? And I don't mean make them feel bad.
And the trial was run fairly, and Ghomeshi's lawyer was able to prove as much as it's possible to prove that he is likely innocent. Like, normally these things would be a his word against her word sort of thing, but they've been shown to be lying under oath, and also the messages that they sent him indicate, well, no. But then
they indicate their continuing interest in him.
Yes.
Also, I don't believe they proved that when he did something and somebody screamed no, 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 that he didn't stop.
That's true. They didn't prove that either.
Because technically that is the old standard. The old legal standard is effectively you're allowed to try and do something sexual to somebody, but then if they clearly indicate that you have gone too far, you have to stop.
Yes, but now the real problem with this isn't actually that he's going free. The problem is it's so certain he's going to be declared innocent that the protests are already being planned about this travesty of justice, as the protest was put, and there's another real push that for crimes of sexual assault, the current court system doesn't work, and you need to have some kind of separate new court system just for that.
Well, yes, and the press is feeding this. Even the sort of conservative-ish Canadian press is all lamenting how this is going to be damaging for women and rape victims.
Yes, and just bullshit.
Okay, and they seem to be blaming Jian Ghomeshi for that. Even though the fact is it's really more the prosecutors and possibly the witnesses' fault.
Yeah. And not only that, but they're making arguments that Jian Ghomeshi's lawyer shouldn't have been able to cross-examine them the way he did.
I think I believe his lawyer is a woman.
Oh, yes, no, she is a woman. Sorry. She shouldn't have been able to cross-examine the way she did and should have respected their status as victims.
Actually, this case is a classic example of why cross-examination is actually necessary.
Yeah, but no, apparently the cross-examination was wrong, and apparently people are arguing that a lot more should have been considered, that people that go through a traumatic experiences, memories might be muddled and shouldn't be questioned as much.
That sort of defeats the purpose of having a trial.
It does, and the thing people imply that they want is someone that is not that where the accused aren't going to be able to meet their accusers, and the judge is going to have certain restrictions, or more to the point, the trial should basically be, if I were to take their arguments to their logical conclusion, be a trial where it has become you are guilty until you can prove you're innocent, and we're also going to take away some of the tools you have to try and prove your innocence.
So the current university trials.
Yeah.
Which they're currently being sued over.
Yeah. Like at least, all right, if you're having, say, a relationship with someone and you want to be able to prove that this was consensual, at least there's been more or less a precedent being established that at least you have some written form of communication afterwards, you're in the clear. Now they wanted to go even a step further where, well, it just really depends how they feel about it regardless of anything.
On the most favorable interpretation, the fact is human memory is incredibly fallible. It is entirely possible, although not likely, that these women actually didn't remember the relationships as they were, but just how they wanted to remember them, and actually thought that they had sort of told him off and not contacted him again because this was several years ago. That still means they effectively had to be contradicted in court because reality was not how they remembered it,
Yeah,
being the victims that they were.
yeah. And that just means that it's not enough evidence for him to go to jail.
Well, quite frankly, yanking someone's hair, especially if he's willing to stop, isn't really enough to go to jail anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, and the slapping is, well, rude, but there's a reason why people slap other people when they're outraged. It's because slaps, unless done very repeatedly and very hard, don't actually hurt you. Well, injure you.
Well, look,
It's just an really sort of an asshole thing to do to somebody who isn't expecting it.
like, I understand that people are concerned about sexual assault, but there are plenty of ways to deal with this, from just making sex education class mandatory in schools and also just teaching people the laws that I hate to say it govern sex. There is also just putting money into things like testing the backlog of rape kits that still need to be tested.
Oh yes, no, there are actual real rape and sexual assault trials and crimes out there, which are standing in a big backlog, which could actually put real predators in jail.
Oh yes, and just having building the system where we can cross-reference DNAs and just understand that yes, if we've taken these samples from all of these rape kits, we can understand that one guy has raped, say, 20 women, and we need to find this guy, and we get a good idea of what his modus operandi is, where he is, and so on and so on.
Yeah, no. I mean, the evidence so far, which is collected by various rape and women's advocacy groups in the earlier decades, showed that rapes are generally a pattern of a certain small number of people.
Yes.
I mean, there's the occasional casual, stupid, drunken rape, which also needs to be prosecuted, but the bulk of actual dangerous rapes and assaults and sexual assaults are done by a small number of people who just consistently get away with it time and time again until they're caught.
Oh, yes. No. And there's other reforms we could do that would definitely help the problem and have immense positive results without basically us creating the Q trial where a judge will basically hover above the accused. You don't get to face your accuser. You're presumed guilty, and legal trickery is banned from thy courtroom. Uh,
Well, it's possible they may make an option for the victim to do some sort of justice circle or other sort of proceeding, although it would be difficult under the current establishment of British/Canadian common law for you to impose actual prison time for an informal judicial proceeding such as that, but that may be the preference of certain people who would rather see there be judgment handed out, even if that judgment doesn't actually lock up people who are serial rapists.
yeah, but in a way, that is also worse in the other sense of that will give more impetus for people to abuse it, and people still suffer greatly under these things. They have their lives ruined. Like Jian Ghomeshi, for example. Yeah, he's won his case, but he's lost his job. His professional career in general is in tatters. And as far as I know, he is basically just living off of his savings.
Well, yeah, I mean, he'll get to write a book out of this, and he probably will actually sue somebody or several somebodies over this, but the Canadian system isn't as generous as the American system when it comes to those lawsuits.
Yeah, no, it's not. Like, and that's the thing. There's a reason why justice is supposed to be dealt by the state as opposed to a justice circle declaring someone guilty and then society taking its vengeance, which amounts to mob justice.
Now, it's kindly mob justice. For the most part, people won't get killed by it and strung up and hung from the city walls. They'll just have all their money taken away and never be allowed to work or participate in society again.
And basically, people will constantly harass them over social media and in real life.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, just make their entire lives and reality a prison for them.
Yeah, no. Like, there is plenty of reforms to deal with things without creating a totalitarian state. And just to say that this, in my opinion, this is my real problem with feminism. I'm completely okay with equality for the sexes, and I'm in favor of a bunch of reforms. But the reforms top feminists keep giving basically are, let's throw us into a totalitarian state. They don't push, say, the rape kit backlog and putting funding in there, which is something even the conservatives could be brought on side with, right? Or say with the wage gap. Yeah, well, let's, aside from the data points, let's assume there's a wage gap for a moment. The simple solution is just to pass a law where employers have to disclose what they're paying to their employees.
That would certainly be the easiest solution.
It would be an easy solution. It would help a lot of other problems, just aside from the theoretical wage gap. This would even help with the problem of, oh, look, the secretary is magically making more money than the engineers. How did that happen? And that goes for both male and female secretaries in certain situations. But anyways, but still, like, employers would then have to justify why they're paying X person a certain amount. And it would give people a major tool to negotiate their salaries with.
Oh, yes. No, the fact is, whenever you're in a negotiation, the side which has the most information is the one which is most advantaged.
Yes.
And if effectively your employer knows what everyone's being paid, but their employees do not know, then the employer is at an advantage in any negotiation over pay.
Yes.
Which is why you should probably, I know it's a sort of a North American taboo, but you should disclose to your fellow workers if they ever ask how much you're actually being paid, and ask them how much they're being paid if they're willing to tell you.
But this would allow people to know what everyone is being paid. It allow employees to compare with other companies what another company is paying versus their company. This would be a great boon for the employees and be a simple, easy, very beneficial reform, and would solve the theoretical problem of the wage gap, or at least greatly decrease it.
No, it'd help with the whole negotiation process where women are effectively argued to be less aggressive in their negotiations. Yeah. I think they would find that if they suddenly find out they're actually making 77 cents to all the other males in the same position they are in, then suddenly they would feel slightly less likely to go easy on their wage negotiations.
Yeah. Yeah, and it also goes for problems like with immigrants that would find out if they're being paid less, or other people, right? I mean, but they're not advocating for that. They're advocating for basically some kind of law to enforce this, which I guess would be enforced by examining the tax receipts, maybe kind of. And laws like that have been already passed in the States and have done virtually nothing, because employers can always argue, well, the reason I'm paying this person differently is because they have more experience or another degree or something.
I don't know. I would think the biggest thing feminists have to do right now is actually reform of the immigration system to allow women and women with children from locations in which they are disadvantaged in regards to education or genital surgery practices to be given priority to be allowed refugee status into Western nations.
But they're not doing that either. They're instead advocating these totalitarian solutions that don't work. They at some point have been advocating why we should blame all men for the Cologne attack rather than, say, the police of Cologne not enforcing the rule of law. And you see, like, our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, give a speech that actually Sargon of Akkad has done a bit of a takedown video about, or a commentary video about, where Justin Trudeau is giving the great achievement of women already that was so hard to achieve, of having a gender parity cabinet, because this is a massive achievement, and stating his next goal, rather than any of these reforms I've listed, is to have a gender parity parliament.
You know what actually needs to happen? There needs to be a new feminist organization which actually concentrates on women's rights issues.
Yeah.
There needs to be an organization, a new one, which is based around promoting women's rights around the world, actually dealing with attempting to get actual rapists put in jail rather than redefining what rape and sexual assault is.
Oh, yes.
I'm going to have to look and see if there actually is one out there. Otherwise, do you want to start a feminist organization?
Sure. Why not?
I mean, technically, you don't have to be female to be a feminist.
Depending on what interpretation they go with, but...
No, let's just go with the literal interpretation that feminists say feminism is about, which is equality and protecting women from situations in which they're being, effectively discriminated against.
Yes, no, I would be quite in favor of doing that, because this is bullshit.
And but seriously, this needs to be done. They're beyond the fact of thumbing their nose at third, fourth wave, fifth wave feminism. There are actual real issues which are currently being ignored, and a lot of women who are being, really, really disadvantaged in the world.
Oh yes, no, there are actual problems facing women, and instead of going for the actual solutions that would help women, they've turned to these, like, basically bullshit Tumblr solutions.
No, I think this needs to be done.
Oh, yes. No, it really does.
I don't know what to call it, but it really does need to be done. I mean, I'm fine if somebody else is doing it and I can support them, but somebody needs to back this up, because with feminists becoming more interested in social justice issues and sort of this sort of identity politics, actually there's nobody really publicly speaking up. Well, there are a few individuals, but there's no actual organization I've seen publicly speaking up for actual women's issues.
No, there really isn't at the moment. No, there's no one, say, taking Justin Trudeau's government to task about, or any government to task, as far as I know, about, say, the rape kit issue, or at least they're not getting the publicity they should be getting. They're not getting the publicity for it. The women we've put into schools in Afghanistan, where we promised them that we were going to defend them, and now with the withdrawal and the advance of the Taliban, we are not going to defend them, and we're not giving them asylum in Canada for some reason. Are all going to die,
Or at least
and
putting them at the front of the queue.
yeah, putting them at the front of the queue, considering we're the ones that got them into this mess. That needs to be advocated. And yeah, just even say with my proposal for just with wages, just forcing employers to have to publicly disclose what they're paying people. Yeah.
Yes, an actual solution.
No, this really needs to be done.
Something we need to further discuss. But in any case, I believe we have run through Jian Gomeshi's situation and the budget situation. Anything else we want to quickly touch on?
Nothing really related to Canada. We can make some mention that Rob Ford unfortunately passed away. The crack-smoking mayor of Toronto.
Yes. Well, for comedians everywhere, I'm sure that is a tragedy. And I know there's a bunch of conservatives who think he's some sort of hero to them.
Yeah.
But really, I mean, he sort of more embarrassed the conservative cause than he aided it.
And the country.
Yeah, and the country. And Toronto.
Yeah.
And crack-smoking white guys.
Yeah. No. So that happened, but no, that's basically it for Canadian stuff. The only thing of possibly worth talking about is Vladimir Putin's latest moves, but that could be for another time.
Yes, I believe that is a different topic. This is the Canadian politics and issues talk.
Right.
We can do another one on other issues. Anyway, good night. Good luck.
Signing off.